Hey, what is going on, guys? In this video today, we're going to be going over some Fortnite settings that don't really get a lot of attention, but I believe will help you have a better overall experience when playing Fortnite, and maybe even help you improve a bit as a player. So when I mention Fortnite settings, the first thing that most of you guys probably think of are some of the more controversial or important ones. You know, the settings like confirm edit on release, edit mode aim assist, etc, etc. Those are all settings where the community is seemingly split right down the middle on whether the setting being on or off is the better option. But we've talked about most of those in depth already, so that's not what this video is going to be focusing on. And then the majority of the remaining settings are more or less obvious whether you want to have them off, so also no need for any kind of discussion there. So what you're left with is about 4 to 5 interesting miscellaneous settings that people either don't really know about or don't care about when they probably should, and that's what we're going to be covering in this video. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, so the first thing that I want to talk about in this video are the in-game graphical settings. My guess is that these settings are something that the vast majority of you guys either haven't changed at all, or maybe you played around with something like brightness for 30 seconds like a year ago, and you just haven't even looked at it since then. And I'm not going to pretend that graphical settings alone are going to make you a much better player, but it's crazy how many people I see playing on these terrible settings that I think are putting them at a pretty significant disadvantage, especially if they're on console. And we'll get into a little more detail about that shortly. But even just changing brightness alone can make a really noticeable difference depending on the monitor/TV you play on. Here's a side-by-side example of what Fortnite on console looks like during in-game nighttime on the default 100 brightness versus 130 brightness. Not the biggest difference in the world, but I think we can all agree that 130 looks a bit better, and it would be a lot easier to see enemies on that brightness in-game. However, keep in mind that's only for my specific monitor, so it could be totally different for your TV/monitor, so definitely play around with it a bit before coming to a specific value. Another interesting thing that I heard regarding console Fortnite specifically is that certain colorblind settings can actually make up for some of the graphical problems that console Fortnite has. The most notable one is the fact that you're forced to play with shadows on, which can be very problematic to say the least. So I'm not gonna 100% vouch for this because I haven't gotten around to fully testing it yet for console, but I've heard a few good things about the colorblind setting Tritanope set to 5 strength. Apparently it looks very similar to regular Fortnite, and just adds a bit of contrast with certain things that need it, and makes shadows look a little less overpowering. The next thing I want to talk about are some various settings that a lot of players seemingly don't know about. The first one is motion blur, and it's under the advanced graphics settings. Now this is a really weird one because the ability to turn on or off motion blur was initially added to the game all the way back in Season 8, but only for some consoles. For example, I had the motion blur setting with my Xbox One X, but my friends who played on the regular Xbox or Xbox Slim actually didn't have that option. But that finally changed a few weeks ago, and at this point I believe every console now has this setting. Now what's funny about the description for motion blur is that it kinda tries to lead you into turning it on. It says, some people are very sensitive to motion blur. Disable this effect to prevent nausea or keep it enabled to get more fluent animations. So I'm sure at least a few people read that and were like, well, I don't get nauseous while playing video games, but I do want better animation, so I'm gonna turn this on. Pretty reasonable, but that's simply just Fortnite trying to bamboozle you. Motion blur is something that you want to turn off not only in Fortnite, but pretty much in any shooter video game that allows you to disable it. All it does is makes your screen a little more blurry when you make quick turns, which I guess is realistic, but all it ends up doing is obstructing your vision and hurting you. And the funny thing is, I actually saw a few tweets from people saying that their motion blur was actually set to on by default. So even if you know you'd never turn it on yourself, just give it a quick check to make sure it's all good. The next setting here is tap to search/interact. I saw a comment on one of my videos from about a week ago that basically said something like, "Bro, how do you revive people and drop stuff at the same time? Whenever I try to do that, it just cancels the revive." And this comment had something like 20 thumbs up, so clearly a decent amount of people wanted to know the answer to that. So what tap to search/interact does is it enables you to just tap your interact or action button one time, and then the game will register as if you're continually holding it down until you complete whatever action you initiated. Now this is definitely mostly a matter of convenience, especially with shorter actions like opening chests or supply drops, but when it comes to longer things like reviving a teammate or using a reboot van, it's really helpful to have tap to search/interact enabled because it will allow you to go into your inventory and even drop things that your teammates may need. And the final setting that people have asked me about recently is the reticle ammo indicator, and more specifically, why I don't use it. It isn't a huge deal to me, but I just personally feel like it obstructs my vision a little, and it kinda looks like a part of the crosshair when you're using certain weapons, so I just keep it off. The final thing I want to talk about in this video is your HUD or HUD, whichever term you want to use. And for those of you guys not familiar with what exactly that term means, it basically refers to all the display elements of Fortnite that stay on your screen the entire time you're playing. So things like your map, you and your teammates' names, your health bar, your inventory, your materials, and just off the top of my head, I think that's everything. And I know this may seem like something that doesn't really affect much, but trust me, it definitely can. And let me tell you a funny little story about this exact topic. A few weeks ago, I was playing Fortnite with one of my friends who's played the game since Season 2 or 3, and he's definitely a really solid player. And I was gonna hop off the game for a bit because I needed to work on something for school, and he told me that he was actually about to play the weekly Cash Cup, so I told him to share screens through Discord so I could watch him play a little in the background. And when he starts up the stream, I see that he's still playing on the default HUD and the default safe zone, which he thought was just totally normal. So that opened my eyes to the fact that if this guy, who's a good player and has been playing the game for a while, could still use this horrible HUD layout, there's probably a lot of people out there doing the same exact thing. So here's what that default HUD layout looks like with also the default safe zone. The majority of you guys are probably thinking, ew, this is disgusting, how does anybody play on this? But I'm sure at least some of you guys can't even tell what's wrong here. As you can see, first off, with a HUD scale of 100%, all those display images I talked about earlier are just huge, especially the map. I mean, this thing is taking up what seems like a solid 5 to 10% of my total screen. Also, because I'm using the default safe zone, all this stuff is pushed towards the center of my screen when it should actually be towards the edges. And here's why this is actually problematic. Let's say I'm running forward or just looking forward kinda like this. So much of that brick and metal wall area where a theoretical enemy could be is blocked off by the map. It just feels like so much of your view is restricted that it's no doubt in my mind gonna make you play worse in the long term. So now here's an example of what an 80% HUD scale with a properly set safe zone looks like. I mean, it's a breath of fresh air compared to what you guys just saw. So please, 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 if you haven't already adjusted your HUD, lower it a bit from the default 100%, and also set up your safe zone so it lines up to the edges of your TV. I believe you can only change this in-game for some reason under like the user interface section in the Fortnite settings, so if you can't find it when you open your settings from the main menu, that's probably why. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you watched the entire thing, be sure to let me know with a comment down the comment section below. I know that if you're a good player, you probably knew most of, if not all this stuff already, but if you changed any settings because of this video, let me know which one it was. Be sure to leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, turn on post notifications, do whatever the heck you want, and I will catch you guys next time.